Welcome to the Landlord Diaries, where we talk about midterm rentals and the opportunities behind them. We'll share landlord stories, talk about maximizing investment potential, and discuss how to live the very best landlord life. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Furnished Finder, the leader and largest online marketplace for midterm rentals. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.
We are back with the Landlord Diaries. It's your host team, Kelly Bailey and Katie Lyon, coming to you from the Furnished Finder marketing team and midterm rental hosts ourselves. So today we get a special privilege of talking with a person that has been a high-level influencer in the corporate housing industry for 20, 30 years. So Katie, who are we talking with today and what were your big takeaways?
Yeah, today we get to talk to Elaine, and Elaine is super experienced and knowledgeable in corporate housing, which has a lot of overlap with midterm rentals. It's part of kind of the history of midterm rentals, still a really important sector within midterm rentals. So we dive into what exactly is corporate housing, where does it overlap, how can you be a great corporate housing provider, or how can you just take some good tips and tricks from corporate housing? And Elaine has a lot of information. So we've put together a lot of those questions here and gotten some great takeaways, and we are excited for you to listen.
Elaine Quiroz is a founding member of CHPA, CHPA, and president of Corporate Housing Strategies, which is the nation's leading provider of sales training and consulting in the furnished corporate housing midterm rental space. With 30 plus years of high-level experience in the corporate housing industry, Elaine will talk with us today about types of corporate housing customers and how to best capture their business. Elaine, we're so excited to have you with us today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excited too because it's great to be able to talk about corporate housing, but also how it ties into midterm rentals, which it's a very timely topic right now.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's dive in. First off, you've had a huge impact on the corporate housing industry. So give us a little background on who you are and how you've affected the industry.
Well, there are many that have done that, I'm sure, but I did start. I was 25. It was 1988, so it's been almost 35 years. Started with Oakwood Corporate Housing, which became the world's largest corporate housing provider, and they're the innovator of corporate housing. They were sold 3 or 4 years ago, so you don't hear that name anymore. So if you're somewhat new to the industry, Oakwood may not ring a bell with you. But I did start with them in '88, and within probably 4 or 5 years, I was national sales manager, and we grew to 20,000 furnished units worldwide, 50 states, 86 countries. So it was a huge, and remained until they were sold just a few years ago, remained, the number one leading corporate housing provider in the world, the largest.
Right.
So I did stay with them for about 10 years. I helped put together their national sales program, their relationships with, Fortune 500 companies, relocation companies. We had to kind of figure out for the first time how to do that. No one had ever really created a program like that and offered it to corporate America. And then I left. I had been there about 10 years and left and started a consulting firm, my own company, which is Corporate Housing Strategies, and I've had that now for over 20 years. And I work with anyone from corporate housing providers, large, small, mid-size. I work with individuals that are thinking about getting into corporate housing, or maybe they are a midterm rental landlord, owner. They could have one unit. I work with a lot of people that don't even have a unit, and they're thinking, is this an industry that I want to get in? How does that differ from long-term rentals, or how does it differ from short-term rentals, and what would I need to do, and how do I capture business? So in my work with different providers, I could be working in terms of training them and inside and outside sales. It could be helping a furniture rental company better understand the industry. I've worked with insurance housing providers and helping them understand why can a corporate housing company not always extend the lease when I want them to. It's really just being a kind of a voice, I think, in the industry, and helping different companies and different factions of the industry understand corporate housing better.
Fun fact, Elaine and I actually met on social media. I typically watch responses, and there's a lot of great responses out there, and there's a lot of terrible responses out there. So with Elaine's, I was like, wow, this lady is special. She knows exactly how to respond and encourage people in their business. And so I just
Wow.
reached out and we connected. I think it was on Facebook Messenger.
It was,
I
yeah.
think from the
Yeah.
Furnished Finder social page, maybe. I don't remember which page it was.
I think it was the Furnished Finder page, because I also am a landlord, and I have my apartment where I accommodate travel nurses, and sometimes I'm participating in the group as a landlord, just talking about units, and then sometimes I'll step in and have that consulting voice, and I'm sure people are thinking, where did that come from? So it can be a little of both. But I love participating in those types of groups with people that are just getting started, or people that have kind of found their way, because you always learn from other people. Nobody has it all figured out. So,
I think it's also a reflection of the midterm industry, right? Because everyone that I've encountered is so welcoming and encouraging and open to giving you feedback and tips and advice and connecting you to people that they're connected to. And it's something that I think is really special, and not every industry has that.
I agree. Not every industry has that, and it just makes it so much better, especially if you're one of those people who really is not. I don't really ever try to hide my information. I've done a lot of speaking. I do, speak at conferences, and I think it's so great to just put out there what you know and what could help other people. And so I think it is a good fit for
Yeah.
corporate housing and midterm rentals, because I think our industry really embraces that,
Yeah, I
quite
would
a bit.
agree.
So
And
I enjoy that.
the Facebook group, if any of you are listening and you're not a part of it, it is a great place to connect with other landlords and also to connect with tenants, and not just to fill a vacancy or find a tenant, but also just to ask them questions, right? What are you looking for in a property? How important is this versus this? It's a great way that we've set up this group. I believe there's almost 150,000 people in it to really
Yeah,
connect.
it's big.
Yeah, there's a lot of groups where travelers can talk to travelers and landlords can talk to landlords, but this is one of the only ones where you can kind of cross that barrier, and
Right.
get good information for each other. So search Furnished Finder in the groups on Facebook; it'll pop up. But yeah, let's keep going along that thread, because I know you are a well-known trainer and a speaker in the corporate housing space. So tell us a little bit more about this part of your career, how this came about, why you're able to help so many people, some of your biggest messages. Tell us a little bit about it.
Um, how it came about. This was really, I left Oakwood on great terms. My daughter was a year old, and I was flying almost every week, nonstop. I mean, the company was growing, and I loved what I was doing, and I had no intention of leaving the industry, but I just did not want to, stay on that grind, where you're just gone all the time. So I started my company, helping, mainly just to start with consulting, but it really flourished and became, teaching, training, speaking at Corporate Housing Providers Association, which Kelly said is CHPA or CHPA. I've been very involved in that group, and since the year they started, which I believe was 1997. So a founding member of that. And then also other ancillary groups like the National Apartment Association. 10 years ago, I think, was the first time we actually petitioned them several times, as CHPA saying, can we get corporate housing on the agenda so that we can talk to multifamily developers about what what is now called rental arbitrage, but we would call it third party leasing. So rental arbitrage is kind of the new term that, midterm rental owners and operators use. But third party leasing is just not owning the building, going in and talking to the property management company, the multifamily developer, and taking those apartments and offering them to clients. So that was that was the first time they had really let corporate housing be on their agenda at the National Apartment Association, and it was informing them how this can be a benefit to your property. How can you make it a win-win? How can you partner with these corporate housing providers or now midterm rental operators? So these topics, I think that's another thing that's important to share today, is that these topics such as rental arbitrage and whatever, they're not new. In other words, corporate housing, it's a 50-year-old industry. And I think it's always good to learn from the people that have walked the path. It's not like corporate housing providers know everything. They don't. But there's a lot that's already been covered, and we don't need to repeat their mistakes. We learn from the people that have already walked the path and say, how can we do that differently? How can we do it better? How can we, better reach clients? All those things. So to me, there's very much a synergy between midterm rentals, corporate housing, all of that.
And what should Furnished Finder hosts know about CHPA or CHPA?
CHPA is the industry group for corporate housing providers, and it's been around, as I said, since about 1997. Midterm rental providers could certainly be a member of CHPA. I would say that on average, probably their smallest member at CHPA would be somebody that may have 20 or 25 units. When you look at the awards that they give nationally, for example, they have, awards for Company of the Year, and they start with companies that have 5 million in revenue or less, and then they have 10 million, 25, 50 million. So that kind of gives you a scale of, who's there. I mean, it definitely is a benefit, and there are great resources on their website. They also have local networking functions in different cities around the country all throughout the year. So anyone that is interested in learning more about CHPA, I would love to talk with them. Is it something that we should join? Is it something I should just maybe follow? There's also an industry designation with CHPA, which is the Certified Corporate Housing Professional, and that is a CCHP designation that you may sometimes see after someone's name in the corporate housing industry. And I was instrumental in helping them set that up, and that is just helping professionals in the industry, clients or other corporate housing companies can see that designation and know that is a person that's been in the industry for a certain number of years or has a certain amount of knowledge, that sort of thing. So, the industry has really started, CHPA started, and then it really has become much more of a kind of a voice for the industry. You'll see them mentioned in the press quite a bit when people, are asking for stats on the corporate housing industry. How large is it? But I do think it's something that certainly our midterm operators should know about, and some of them definitely may want to consider joining, because there's a national conference every year, and as I said, there are regional meetings all over the country.
Yeah, and Furnished Finder was at the national conference last year, and Kelly was lucky enough to go. And I remember when she came back, she was like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing. So many great operators and so many good resources and other companies to use as resources." She was like, this is so great. So I would almost encourage, I mean, I know Kelly and I don't even have that number of properties to kind of be on the lower side of a member, but I still follow CHPA and read the newsletter and things like that. And they do,
right.
It's even if you're not a member, the information, it's that same theme of helping everyone get better. There's no gatekeeping. There's there's no, let me hide this information from you or just tell you a tidbit. It really is kind of this culture of helping everyone get better. And especially because when you're in the midterm style, we don't need 100 tenants a year like a short term, right? So it makes it so much easier for us all to pitch in and help one another. So I would encourage people, to just listen in, follow, because there's great resources that the organization provides.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Furnished Finder, the ultimate platform for hassle-free midterm rentals. Whether you're a seasoned landlord or just getting started, Furnished Finder has everything you need to find your next tenant. With Furnished Finder, you can say goodbye to booking fees, markups, and commissions, and hello to direct bookings. If you're ready to experience all the benefits renting your property for 30 days or more, head over to furnishedfinder.com where you can list your property for one low annual price. We make it easy to get started.
I do want to add, so tying in CHPA with Furnish Finder, the conversations I had over and over with corporate housing providers on the large scale that, like you're saying, the smallest operator there maybe has 25 listings. So there's a lot with, hundreds of properties.
Thousands. Yeah. Thousands.
And what I saw over and over in relation to Furnish Finder is how many operators said, "Oh, we put a property on Furnish Finder to kind of test it out and see how it did, but we didn't pursue it after that." And I think that's the biggest mistake, is if you are a large operator and you have multiple properties in an area, Furnish Finder's a lead generation platform. We are not a booking platform. So it's not just, hey, here's your booking. Now, set them up. It's, hey, we have travelers from all over the country looking to come to your area, and they can put in what's called a housing request, which is one message that triggers every landlord in that city. And if you just have one listing in one area of your city, but you actually have, hundreds in that city, or 25 or so in that city, well, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're not going to get all the housing requests, which we call tenant leads on the landlord
Right.
side. Those tenant leads are specific to each area. So if you're only adding one property, you're not seeing all the
Right.
tenant leads coming in, within an hour of your area. You're also
Right.
not showing them that you are a professional operator in that space. If you just have one listing on Furnish Finder, but you have hundreds, or 20s or 30s, well, the more properties you have on Furnish Finder, the more that is going to position you as a professional in the space.
Right.
And it's a really great opportunity for cross marketing. I don't know about you, Katie, but for me, having properties spread out throughout Austin, there's been a ton of times that someone says, "Oh, I'm interested in this property." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for your interest. I also have this property that I think would be a even better fit for you." And they never even would have found that property, because there's so many properties to search through. So I want to make sure and encourage any corporate housing providers listening right now that Furnish Finder is a great tool.
I also want to add to that, if you do have a large portfolio that you're looking to add to Furnish Finder, connect with our customer service team and they can streamline it a little bit for you. So, you don't get in that repetitive listing. They can streamline it a little bit for you and help you out. But I even have 3 studio apartments within the same 2 buildings. They are literally, we've talked about this before, Kelly, they're literally identical, like down to the couch and the throw pillows. Like the first one worked, so we ordered exactly the same stuff. One of them has a different color chairs because they were out of stock. But I have listings for all 3 of them. And it's amazing how many times I'll get booking requests or messages about specific ones. And it's because maybe that cover photo stood out to them, or the headline I'm using for that one stood out to them. So I think about it like if you're in a grocery store and you're in the cereal aisle, right? Like Kellogg's doesn't have one box of cereal on there and they just want you to contact them and then you're hoping, they're hoping they can go from there. They want to take up as much of that shelf space as they can, right? Because the bigger part of the pie you take up, the bigger presence you have, the more of the market's attention you're getting. So don't hesitate to do that. It's such a low annual cost to list your property anyway that it's like you just got to do it. Okay, so I want to get in, Elaine, and talk about your personal rental because not only do you have the CHPA side, you have the consulting side, you also are a landlord, which is huge because anyone who does consulting or leadership, I want to know, but have you walked in the shoes that we're all walking in? So love that. Exactly. So tell us about your midterm rental, how you came about it, how it's performing. Give us the 101.
I will say, this is what I love about being able to just have one or two units of your own. And I have had my rental, even though I've been in the industry 35 years, I never thought about having my own rental. I was busy speaking, helping other companies, selling, that sort of thing. I did not see it, as a real estate play for myself, which I could have. But I ended up in a situation where my kids were like middle school age, and I was a single mom and decided to send these kids to a private school. And that was not in the budget. And I thought, how am I going to do that? And I quickly went through a quick list of how I could do that. And in about 90 seconds, I said, you need to put furniture in that first level of your home. It's a large home, it's 3 levels, but the downstairs has a private entrance, it has private parking, it's 700 square feet, it's 1-bedroom den, and I had that furnished within 1 week. And off we went. And that has been it's beautiful. It's not, it's very unique in the sense that it's not walking distance to the hospital. In other words, there's a lot of things that it's not, and that purely is an example of, but who do you attract? Who are you best for? So, we have views of the mountains. They have a stream they can sit and look at night, and then we're about 17 minutes from the hospital. So it's been a win-win. It's been about 90 to 95% occupancy the whole way through. I think this is 13 years now, 12 years now. And it's, mostly, again, this is my product. It's not that I don't know how to accommodate, larger, more high-end customers, but my product is a perfect fit for a travel nurse or someone that is in town on assignment, that sort of thing. A corporate housing company is not going to come to me and say, let us put our senior vice president in there from Boeing or whatever. And I think that the message there is you do not have to be all things to all people. You just figure out, here's what I'm best at, here's who I can best serve, and I'm going to be really great at that. And then, being really good with your listing. I've also had a single family home that was a 4-bedroom. It was kind of in a historic market, little town in Virginia, and that had a very unique customer base, and I had that for about 5 years, and that stayed full all the time as well. So and then one other friend that I managed their corporate rental for them. They were struggling with financially, not struggling, but saying, I need to do better, I need more money. And of course I said, do I have an idea for you? And so that's it. Really, I think even if I sold my house and bought another house, which I don't plan to do, I would look for something where I could have a rental, whether that's, a cottage in the back or, the first level furnished. I mean, for me, there's so much privacy. Maybe it's the layout, but I never see my guests. I barely hear my guests. But I love taking care of them. I love having that to offer them, and it's been great for me income-wise. It's just consistent, and so I really never intended to have my own unit. Even though you're thinking, why would you want to have your own unit? I had so many other things going on. Now I wouldn't not have those units because it just has been. I don't want to say easy, but honestly, it has been. it's just smooth. And once you figure out who your customer is and you have a good product and you know how to market it, and I have my unit on Furnished Finder, and that for me, it really is the only place that I need to list. I used to have it listed on Airbnb. I, got to superhost status and would, use it in between guests and all that. But I just really, there's so much on Airbnb that you can't control. And I love the autonomy that Furnished Finder gave me. I was able to, screen my own guests and talk with them about what they're looking for and just see if it really be a good fit for both of us. And I love that aspect of Furnished Finder. So I just personally, again, not for everybody, but I, made the decision about 2 or 3 years ago that I didn't really want to do the Airbnb thing. It just works for me. So, but yeah, I've really enjoyed that.
Hey landlords, are you ready to level up your rental game and simplify your midterm rental business? Well, get ready to meet your new best friend, KeyCheck. KeyCheck is your all-in-one solution for stress-free property management. With tenant-paid screenings, online rent payment processing, custom lease creation, and a suite of incredible landlord tools, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. No more chasing down checks or sifting through piles of applications. KeyCheck helps you organize and manage all things landlording in a simple and efficient way. Make landlord life a breeze with KeyCheck, the game changer for modern property owners. Visit keycheck.com to unlock the power of stress-free property management and take your rental business to new heights.
I want to dive into where you are an expert, which is corporate housing. So let's kind of start from the beginning and help our listeners understand the difference between a midterm rental and corporate housing. And I'm thinking, way back to second grade where you do a Venn diagram, right? Where it's like, here are the similarities, here are the differences. So talk us through that, because I know sometimes they're used interchangeably, the middle part of that little Venn diagram, but they do have some differences. So give us kind of the high level intro to corporate housing.
It's really shouldn't be a mystery. I mean, it's very there. The similarities are strong. The similarities would be that corporate housing providers and midterm rentals are typically looking at 30 days or longer, meaning it's a real estate play. It's a lease. Occasionally, a corporate housing provider will have some nightly rentals on Airbnb or Booking.com, but that may just be to fill a gap, and some of them don't ever do that at all. So I would say 97% of the time, corporate housing is going to be for a month or longer.
That shocks me a little
Corporate
bit.
housing, it's almost all that they do. Like I said, there's the occasional one-off, but as everybody in this industry knows, it's getting harder and harder in many cities to operate as a short-term. In many cities you have to be licensed and this and that. So what used to be easier to maybe throw up a unit if you have 10 days of vacancy, we'll just throw it up there and see if we can fill it until the next guest moves in. It has gotten a little more complicated. So yeah, I would say 95, definitely, strongly 95% of the industry is for a month or more. So in that sense, we're really doing the same thing. It's what I call 4 walls and a roof and furniture and, putting them on a lease. So in that respect, it's going to be the same. Where and they also both focus on things like insurance housing. There are corporate housing companies like National Corporate Housing, which is one of the larger ones in the country. They have an entire insurance housing division, National Insurance Housing. So, some people think, oh, they don't get into insurance housing or whatever. They actually pioneered that probably 30 years. Corporate housing companies really were the pioneer in insurance housing. So they do, and when they can find the right match, they are a player in that. Where I think we see the difference is that most, not all, don't want to stereotype, but most midterm rental operators, this is a real estate play for them. They are investing in a property or two. They may do rental arbitrage, and put furniture in, and then, hope to keep that leased. But I with corporate housing, probably 90% or more of the industry is not owned. It's not a real estate play. It is rental arbitrage. They are going in, Now they are having very strong relationships with multifamily housing developers, property management companies. They're very good at negotiating the terms of their leases, seeing if they can get an out clause in there that would, minimize any risk. So they're doing it at a high level and they're doing it very, very well. But I think people are surprised that corporate housing is, in effect, primarily rental arbitrage. Now, they may have 5 units at a property, they could have 35 units at a property. And it could also be the same property that one of our midterm rental operators has a unit in. In other words, that's kind of the mystery of furnished rentals is you'd never drive down the street and see a sign. Like if you're at a Marriott, like there's a sign. I know that's a Residence Inn. We just kind of hide in where we do business. It could be a home, it could be an apartment. You could be in the same building and there could be, and I have seen this. I've seen 5 different corporate housing providers in the same building on any given day. They've all got different customers, but that property could be 10 or 15% corporate housing. So it's not unusual to see a property that maybe is 300 or 400 units, and a good percentage of that is corporate housing.
For sure. I do want to add in that the Landlord Diaries, our show, we have had quite a few successful episodes about midterm rental arbitrage operators as well. So I will tag those at the end of this episode. If your play is you don't have you're looking on where to get started, you don't have a ton of cash or a way to buy right now,
Yeah.
rental arbitrage is an excellent way to get started in the industry that doesn't
Oh, yeah.
require a lot of capital and is very
Right.
easy to get started. So that playlist will be at the end, and Katie's one that actually combines arbitrage quite a bit into her business.
Yeah, I think right now we have 7 arbitrage, 6 or 7. And it is great. In my mind, it's been a really good way to kind of keep the growth going without having to have all the capital and funds for a down payment or repairs and stuff like that. But yeah, when you find the right partner, you have to find the right partner, and then it's amazing. But that's interesting. I guess I had never thought about the fact that a lot of corporate housing operators are more in the arbitrage
Right.
or rent to rent zone than the
Right.
ownership. So that's
Right.
really interesting, and I think something that a lot of times isn't connected. So let's talk about how corporate housing providers operate their units. What are some of the things that they're offering to their tenants? Or let's talk about more specifically, like who their tenants often are.
With midterm rental operators, it is many times a real estate play. They have 1 or 2 properties they've invested in. They may have rental arbitrage units. Corporate housing, as we shared, is primarily rental arbitrage. So, where's the value in a corporate housing company, and why when they sell, would they be sold for millions of dollars if there's no real estate? And that's where the big difference lies. Is corporate housing is all about relationships and really creating deep relationships with these companies that are going to use them over and over and over. And that today seems to be a question that I get a lot, which is, how do they get those customers? How do they, keep those customers? How do they get 500 interns from Google, in one deal, or a national agreement with Kraft Foods, which is something, that I went in and was able to negotiate. It's relationships and selling. But again, if they were to sell a corporate housing company for several $1,000,000, there's hardly any real estate involved. What they're selling is, who are your clients? Who are your return clients, your repeat clients that will use you over and over? And what have you created that would be of value to them? Corporate housing companies are not really selling units. It's not as much of, here's an apartment. We actually have 500 apartments. Do you like this apartment? They are selling housing programs, and they are looking at how they can develop services so that they are consistent. so that they have a brand standard, which is when you think of a Marriott or a Marriott, let's say a Residence Inn, you're going to always have hot breakfast 7 days a week. You're going to always have a manager's reception at least 4 nights a week, with hot food. There's certain things you'll always have at a Residence Inn. You're going to find that with corporate housing providers. They are very consistent, and they want to use product that really represents their brand. So a lot of brand standards, and a lot of, as I said, relationships, but corporate housing programs. What that is they may go to a company and say, we will manage your corporate housing program for you. We'll help you create a corporate housing program. What's a program? You have large companies like a Morgan Stanley, for example, or Ernst & Young, and they have the opportunity to do hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate housing every year. They want reporting that shows how many one bedrooms did we have? How many two bedrooms do we have? What's our average spend on a one bedroom? What's our average length of stay? We give them in corporate housing so much reporting, and sometimes a midterm rental operator or even a small corporate housing company will say, well, I could do that same unit for $300 less. I don't understand why they wouldn't want to book with me. That's why sometimes they will stay with one provider and let them do their housing nationwide, is they want to capture all those numbers together. They don't, every time they step out and use someone that's independent, those numbers don't get captured. So it's not how all corporate housing works. There are plenty of people that just make their own decisions. The company's not telling them where they have to stay. But when you get to those larger companies, Hewlett Packard and Boeing and things like that, there's a lot of going on behind the scenes. It can be so large that I know when I was at Oakwood, we would have an Oakwood employee on site in their human resource office, just like an on-site travel agent, just to book and manage their corporate housing around the country. That's probably not as common right now, but I'm saying there's such a depth to it. It's not just about, here's an apartment you can rent, but they task them with going out and finding if they need something in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and it's your job to go find it, make it happen, put furniture in it. In other words, it's not always about, oh, we have all these locations, so, here's the door. Why don't you walk in? It really is about hustling and finding the client, and finding product constantly.
I think the theme there that is service, right? And hospitality. And even when you have a larger customer, like let's say you have a partnership with a Kraft Foods or an HP, that you really are giving them a service, and it's a white glove service. It's you're thinking like a valet, right? Like, let me take care of this for you. And I think what's important is for even our landlords here that maybe have one or two properties or don't even have any properties yet, is to remember that theme and how far that can get you.
Right.
Because with that service, your rent prices can reflect that. You can also make these relationships with smaller companies, right? They don't all have to be the level of an HP or a Kraft, because you might not have 300 properties or the ability to get more at the drop of a hat. But that theme of relationships and service, like Jesse Vasquez talks about this a lot as well, is going out there and forming those, because it is key, right? And they don't have to be giant companies, right? But getting involved and making your presence known, I think, is such a huge part of that corporate housing that can be adopted by a lot of just midterm rental hosts that haven't crossed over into that technical corporate housing side.
And, I've watched, over the years, I've watched highs and lows and shifts in the industry. And, what I see right now in the midterm rental industry, especially, is we had some great years with travel nurses during COVID, and, higher housing stipends, and maybe more people, out there traveling. That's contracted somewhat, that's pulled back. When you have those, what I call, the glory days, where, the business is just, the leads are coming in and you're constantly booked and you're like, I love this industry, I love this business. But sometimes in midterm rentals, we have not, that sector is somewhat new, and they have not always had to be that proactive. They have been what we call, when I do sales training, I talk about proactive and reactive. Reactive is when you decide where you're going to list your property. Do I want to list here? Do I want to list here? I'm going to have make sure my listing is good. And then you basically just react to what comes in. You're reactive. You're not reactive is where you proactive is where you go out there, and we used to say you go out and have to make the phone ring. Reactive is where you answer the phone and close the lead. So this is really a time where even people that have 1 or 2 or 3 units may think 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they may have said, I don't need to do that. I'm fine with what comes in. I really think this is where it's time to say, maybe I do want to do that, because number one, I could talk to 10 people and tell them how to do it, and only 2 are going to go do it. So if you are the person who's going to actually make the effort, you won't have nearly as many competitors as you might have if all you do is list your property. So I'm really a believer that you want to get your property in front of decision makers every way that you can. Outside sales efforts like that don't replace being on Furnished Finder or whatever. You need to be on Furnished Finder. You need to be giving them your link to Furnished Finder, or wherever you have it listed. But yeah, it's about right now how to get in the door. What do you say? Who would I call on? What job title would that be?
I want to tie this into Furnish Finder for sure. So we're talking about some really great things. I've made notes as we're talking. One, Furnish Finder, the proactive is those tenant leads. We hear time and time again how people don't respond to tenant leads, or messaging is just no response. Well, that's because it's a sales opportunity. They're getting hit with dozens to potential 50 to 100 properties in metropolitan areas, where if some people prefer investing in small to mid-sized towns because they can be the
Oh, yeah.
main provider in that town, but in larger metropolitans, you're competing. It's that proactive
Very
sales
competitive.
opportunity. Your messages and direct booking requests, those are the hot leads that said, hey, this
Yeah.
message is only coming to you. Jump on it and secure that contract,
Yeah.
or that
Yeah.
lease in place, because they want your property. Now, could they have sent that same message to 10 other operators? Yes. That's why
Yeah.
it's important to dive in and
Yeah.
get that booking solidified as quickly as possible.
Right.
But you're saying a very important thing, Elaine, that I want you to speak to our Furnish Finder operators. You're saying, and it's so true, I have that mindset. When I respond to tenant leads,
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of times I'm focusing on the property more than the property and the consistent service that I can provide as a host. So I will always put it in there that I'm a 5-star host on Furnish Finder, but I don't build out my personal experience brand a, l- a lot more than that. So what advice do you have on capturing those tenant leads and putting forth a message that says, wow, this is a professional in the space, even if they have just one property?
Right. Um, and you're saying, how would the landlord that has the property, right?
Katie and I, and every landlord on Furnish Finder.
And I think the opportunity here is because, like you said, like if you're being proactive, you're making these calls. Let's say I'm not ready for my own website, right? Or even if I do have my
Yeah.
own website, Furnish Finder,
Right.
your Furnish Finder listing is also a reflection of your brand, you as a
Oh,
landlord,
yeah.
you as your quality, and can also kind of serve as your own
Right.
portfolio, right?
Yeah.
How can I make my Furnish Finder profile stand out and reflect those types of services and differences that I'm going to provide tenants and partners?
That, but I'm also saying that message you send to interested parties, how do you make yourself stand out in that message?
The listing, as well as when you reach out to them.
Yep.
Number one, it's just like we said earlier. 10 people could get that lead, and 2 owners will reach out, and really reach out well. I still reach out to them as if my entire life income is going to depend on this lead. And I know you're thinking, why do you put that much effort into it? Because that's what captures business. I mean, it's not hard. Once you figure out what to say, how to reach out, hey, thanks so much for, usually what I say is thanks so much for reaching out. I see that you're going to be coming to XYZ city. Would love to accommodate you. People always react to the phrase, we would love to help you. We would love to, how can I help you? Would love to have you stay with us. It's not just about quoting rates. We're not selling tires. We are not selling lamps. They're going to put their head on our pillow. And I think that sometimes is what we forget. You really want to share with them how much you invite them in. There's a real hesitancy, especially with travel nurses, because some people have really gotten burned. And they're a little skittish, sometimes about, is it really going to look like that when I get there? And what if I get there and it's just awful? There's that, what if, I think, that's out there. So I think the faster you can respond with a very positive message that reassures them, you're excited to have them stay, you're happy to answer any, I always say, what questions may I answer for you? Are you familiar with the area? Even if it's a few things that have been in the listing, I'll still repeat if I know they are a travel nurse, because they usually put it on their Furnished Finder profile, what agency they're with or whatever. I'll mention again, we're 17 minutes from the hospital. And whatever the high points are, I don't assume they've already read that. It never hurts to just repeat what I call the high points. The apartment has a private entrance with off-street parking. It's a very secure area. Just whatever it is that you offer that makes you special. But reaching out and restating that and then saying, what questions can I answer? And just developing a dialogue. And the other thing that I think we have to, that I had to learn the hard way in sales, there will be people that say, I do that all the time, and I never hear back from them. And the lesson, even in cold calling, is yes, you will, or asking questions, when you talk to a prospective guest, you can ask 10 people and 9 of them will say, no, I don't have any questions, or 9 of them won't get back with you. But if you're consistent with it, 1 will. And that's how you stay full. In other words, you have to do it every time, because even today, I've done this 35 years. I don't know when I reach out like that, which one of them is going to bite and get back to me. I really don't know, but I do it every time and I'm consistent with it. And, I just step out, and tell them how much would enjoy having them stay, ask if they have questions, pop those high points back into the conversation. And then Katie, you mentioned, making your listing stand out, but it's a different topic, but it really is pictures, pictures, pictures. Great description, great description, great description. We can talk more about that separately.
I could go on all day about the importance of pictures. I know that's has a little piece in my heart, is just get really, really good pictures.
Well, people, and we hear this all the time, and I think it gets watered down yeah, I know, I need to have good pictures. When you're let's think about going on vacation. You're going to stay somewhere a week. Now, they're going to stay with us for 3 months, perhaps. But if you're just going somewhere for 1 or 2 weeks and somebody mentions a hotel or somewhere they stayed, the first thing you look at when you go to that website, photo gallery. You want to see what it looks like. And that is where they either pass or play. In other words, if it looks good, then they will. I say it's very much like a resume. If you have a good resume, you're very likely to get the interview.
Yeah.
But you could be fantastic. We have, midterm rental operators that have put so much work into a property. They have phenomenal product. They have, great furnishings. It could just be A++, but if it doesn't present that well, no one's going to see it. So I could not encourage, and then people think, professional photos, that's going to be $300 or $400, $300, If you're at $3,000 a month, it's $100 a day. You could have those photos made for 3 days of rent, and you are just going to bring the money in from those good photos over and over and over and over.
It's the easiest investment that I make with every property. And I know when you're setting up a property, the expenses, they get overwhelming, right? You're like, oh, I've got to get this. I've got to get this. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, I just need to get sheets. But then I'm like, well, I need to get multiple sets of it does get overwhelming, and the photos are the last thing you pay for. So sometimes it is like, okay, my credit card is wearing thin at this point. And do I really need to pay for it? But yeah, you really do. We are a visual society.
We screen. That is how we screen. And if it doesn't measure up very, very quickly, they say even with resumes, people look at it for 7 seconds, and you either go in the interview pile or you go in the trash.
Yep.
We are very visual people, and I do think a good listing is important. That's another topic for another day, what to include, what to say. But every year, people read less and less. We want the quick version. We want the visual.
Please.
And I many times, even when working with corporate housing companies, they might bring me in for 2 or 3 days, and we sit down, they close the door, and they say, okay, we're really struggling with XYZ. I am there to talk to their salespeople, to talk to their inside sales, outside sales. How are we doing all this? But every single time I'll say, let me look at your listing. Let me look at your website. And so many times there's opportunity there.
Yep.
And that's really what I think all of us want to do. Is I always go into a client and say, where's the missed opportunity? What is out there that I'm not getting? What am I missing? Because many times they're doing many things very well, but it's like weak links in the chain. If you don't have good pictures, it is a weak link in your chain, and you will not get them. You don't get to show that beautiful product and take care of these people, and you're sitting there thinking, I'm not getting the inquiries, or I'm not this. And sometimes there might have been 20 people that day that looked at that listing but did not click you. They clicked somebody else.
I also want to encourage people to play with that, because photos and descriptions and marketing in general, which is what that is marketing your property, is part science, right? You always want to say your price clearly, your location clearly. It's also part an art, right? Which there is no right and wrong to. So oftentimes if I have a property with an upcoming vacancy, every couple days I'll switch my cover photo, right? Now that's not going to affect my ranking within the search results. But what it does is if there's someone glancing through and maybe photo B resonates with them more than photo A, right, it gives me a chance. Or if someone's been browsing for a week, I might stand out as someone new, and that new heading I used, or the new property description, or the new photo might grab their attention where it didn't before. Right? So play with those things, and it's not something that's static where you can just set it and leave it. You always want to be making it better, but it is an art. So there's no, you've got to just tinker and kind of see what fits. And it's also going to depend on target customer, the target tenant that you're going after, right? What are they looking for, and how are you speaking to that? So I want to jump into our last portion. And I want to kind of go high hitting, the highlights version here of types of corporate housing customers and how to best capture their business. So let's talk about each of these different types of customers. And Elaine, you give us kind of the high level 411 on them, and then how to best kind of target your property to them.
All right. I hear this term in midterm rentals so often. They say, what's your client avatar? That's the new phrase, just like rental arbitrage. At the end of the day, we're just saying, who's your target customer? Who are you out there for? So it's all the same thing. Location and property are going to be the two things that are going to best determine who you need to go after. You can always change your price. You cannot change your location. And you can only do so much with your product. You can make it better, but price is fluid, and so you want to look at your location, your product, and that's going to help you determine who is going to be best suited for this property. Let's talk about who are the different customers that we want to look at. In other words, if I had 10 properties and could target all of them, who's out there, what are who stays in corporate housing, or who has those 30-day needs. There are really mainly two types. Number one is relocation, and this is not insurance housing where there's a relocation agent that is placing housing. This is corporate relocation where they are moving an employee from city A to city B. He's not going back. She's not going back. They are moving the person. Relocation for years was the number one user of corporate housing, and that was almost all of the time that is outsourced by the company to a third-party relocation management company. So you would say, how do I get these people that are coming in from Boeing? Boeing may not even be making the decision. They have outsourced the entire relocation process to a third-party relocation company like Cardis or Serva. And there's a lot of legal ramifications of moving people. There's a lot of financial ramification, tax ramifications. So for years, that's been outsourced. Now, saying that it was for years the primary customer, that has changed so much in the past 18, 24 months. Number one, it's very expensive to relocate an employee. You're having to maybe do a buyout if their home doesn't sell in the city they're leaving. You're putting them in temporary housing in the new city. You're having to move the household goods. Very, very expensive. And the other thing that's so important is people don't want to move anymore. We have figured out during COVID that a lot of jobs can be done without moving. And so the companies are like, the employees are saying, I think, 30 years ago, if you wanted to move up, you just took that relocation if they offered it to you. You're going to get a promotion and you're going to have to move. And that's how it worked. And then today, people are paying much more attention to their family, their life, their priorities and where they want to be, or, do they want to be near family? And they will say, I'm not moving. I'll take the promotion, I'll take the job, but I don't want to move. And I think COVID was really the key where people started working from home and companies realized a lot can be done without moving people. So the corporate housing industry is seeing a huge decline in the number of relocations and the number of reservations, bookings, apartments that come from the permanent move. What that has done is it has really increased the amount, which is the number two source, is either people moving permanently or people coming temporarily. We now have a huge growth in what we call temporary assignments. People that they'll come in on a project. They may take a promotion and they say, we're going to bring you in every quarter and we're just going to bring you in, da da da. So it's a huge increase in the number of people on temporary assignment. That's expected to grow. So that's going to be engineers, consultants with Ernst & Young, all sorts of things. And quite often, we mentioned with relocation, quite often that's decided by a relocation company, not the end user or whatever. Projects, sometimes the company decides, but very often you have the potential to capture that individual because they are looking online for housing. In other words, if they've been told, here's your budget, here's your stipend, here's what you get. A lot of times those individual travelers can book their own housing. So you're going to see, continue to see, I think, the increase in the number of temporary assignments. Travel nurses, that's a temporary assignment of sorts, but for corporate housing providers, their budget has always been a little low for them. It probably is what has made midterm rentals so successful is there was a huge need and corporate housing providers weren't able to fill that just because it wasn't a price match. So, that was the biggest blessing to midterm rental operators, but also where would all those travel nurses have stayed during COVID if people had not stepped up and said, we're going to create a housing option for them?
This is a fun portion to dive into from the Furnished Finder side. We are known as the trusted name in housing for travel nurses, but travel nurses are around 50% of our current travel base. And that's not because we've lost travelers, that's because of how much we've expanded over the last couple of years and have, over 200,000 properties nationwide. and there's a lot of need for that temporary housing, like you're saying. So I think it's fun to break down from a furnished finder perspective on, who are those 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom and studio clients. And I think what Katie and I see a lot in the tenant leads, and probably you as well, Elaine, travel nurses, travel couples, digital nomads, remote workers,
Yeah. Yeah.
retirees that want to go visit their family. Um,
Right.
those are kind of more the 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And then with the larger, 3 bedrooms and higher, you get a lot of relocating families, large remodels where they have to move out of their home and live somewhere
Right.
else. That ties in with the insurance claims as well, because an instance happens, there's a fire, there's a flood, they need to move out of their property quickly and into a new property. And at the end of the day, they choose the property. A corporate housing provider is going to bring options to the family, but the family gets to say on which property they want to live in, right? Am I missing any? I think one avenue we were going to talk about was construction workers, because a lot of people get nervous from one, is my property going to be taken care of well? Should I background check, the 8 people that just want to sleep in a bed on the floor in my home? And how's it going to look to my neighbors when I'm renting to 8 men in one house or whatever it is? What advice do you have for us on the construction worker side?
It construction can be a great opportunity, but it is considered higher risk. All that means is that you need to do your due diligence and you need to minimize the risk by handling it the right way. The first thing I would say is don't ever let them talk you into something you're not comfortable with. In other words, if you just get a bad feeling or they're like, we want to do this and we want to do that, they tend to take larger homes and they can be hard on your product. So there's no need to say yes if you are hesitant. However, it can, if you're doing it and you have a home and you have 5 bedrooms or whatever, it's definitely a customer you want to look at. I would start by yes, you do a background check on everyone. You want to have a decision maker typically in the company, and you also may want to have a decision maker with the group, like the project manager or whatever. Make sure your lease is very specific as to who is financially responsible, not just for rent,
Good point.
but also for damages. It needs to be spelled out. You need to, I think I said that, do a background check on everyone that's over 18, everyone that's over 18 that's in that unit. I don't care if one person is paying. The background check, the credit check has to do with who's paying. The background check has to do with who is staying in that unit. And I mean, if you did have someone dangerous in a unit, you could be liable if something happened to a child in the neighborhood or whatever, and you didn't do a background check. Just do the background check. The other thing is your product. If I am working with a construction crew, I think you need to just know up front that very likely there's going to be damage to your linens, there's going to be damage maybe to your bedding, your comforters, the towels will get used to clean up a spill. They're just a rougher group on your product. Doesn't make them a bad person. That's just, some of them come home and, they've been working with, products all day or whatever. I usually, if I'm doing or looking at a construction crew, I would budget probably 100 to 150 per bedroom, and I would just tell them right up front, we're taking out the white linens, we're taking out the white duvet, we will put brand new sheets and comforters in there, and you will not be held liable for them when you move out. You're not going to have that taken out of damages. I would be down at Target getting two sets of microfiber sheets and a down alternative comforter, and a maybe like sheets in a gray or a tan. They are fine with that. They don't want to be responsible for those white sheets. So just offering up front to just replace that bedding with something much more practical. Same thing with your towels. Don't get heartbroken because many of them are not going to be usable again. So if I'm pricing something like that out, I would just tell them right up front, you know, you're not going to be held responsible for that. They can either, you could probably build it into your rate, or just let them know that, for a flat fee of blank, there'll be no damages taken out for that. It's not really expensive when you just go out and buy a set of microfiber sheets for $30 and put 2 in each bedroom and a down alternative comforter, and then just some mid-quality towels. But I think you're going to be happier if you just take your good product out. I know people that put covers on sofas and that sort of thing. In other words, just don't, just expect them to be harder on the product.
I think it's getting on the same page with them, right, too, because it's the same thing if someone comes and they have pets, right? That's totally fine. But like if you have a golden retriever who's going to shed all day, every day, you might want to throw a cover on your sofa, or you might want to ask them to always put a blanket on there. So I think it is having those open lines of communication. But you're right. Like if someone is working at a construction site all day, your home is by nature just going to get a little dirtier, not because they're dirty people, but because their line of work is just messier. So just prepare yourself. Yeah, prepare yourself for that. I also personally like to use KeyCheck as much as I can for our tenant screenings. Those are really great. They're really affordable. Most landlords have the tenants pay that just kind of as an application fee. But yeah, just getting on the same page, and then like you said, kind of setting those expectations so that there's no hard feelings or awkward conversations at the end, right?
Yeah. The only other things I'll share about that group, take pictures before they move in. Pictures, take a video of every room, do close-ups of your furniture, anything that you think, could end up in not good shape. Water stains on your tables and all those things, burns on the kitchen countertop. Take lots of pictures with this type of customer. I would also recommend putting in, it seems like such a small thing, but put in a lot of trash cans. Don't have one trash can in the kitchen. They eat out a lot. They bring all this stuff home. You need to have multiple trash cans. I would have multiple trash bags. And often I find that many owners do want to make housekeeping a requirement for this group. They just don't want to find out 3 months later. Number one, it helps you stay clean, but it also gives you some eyes on the property while they're staying there. So often I will see with this type of group that they'll ask them, or basically they'll tell the customer, we will be building in housekeeping every 2 weeks or whatever. Right. And they just don't make that an option because they want to know the property. That's a good idea. Cared for. Some general ideas on how to capture corporate housing business, especially if you're looking at business from corporate housing providers. I would look at their product and see if you match their product, because they do want to stay consistent. Maybe they could use you for 30 days or 60 days and not take out a new unit. Sometimes they may want to do it themselves, but I wouldn't approach them unless you know that your product is going to align with what they offer as well, if you're trying to get business from the provider. If you're reaching out to the corporate clients themselves, I would say, just knowing the types of customers that they're going to be catering to, and knowing what great questions to ask. One workshop that I have offered for years is, it's not what you say, it's what you ask. It's not about talking about your property. It's knowing what questions to ask them about how often do you bring people in? Who do you bring in? How long do they typically stay? What are they typically looking for? What's important to you? Where are they currently staying now when you have people that come in for a month? If you can ask really good questions, you can just cut your sales pitch down to like a focused 10-15% of your content. So I think learning the questions to ask, learning how to ask that question, it'll put you in front of so many more decision makers, and make sure you have a good link to your profile on Furnished Finder or wherever you're listed. And then also it can help to have even if you don't have a website, in the corporate housing industry, it's called a property profile sheet. It's just a one-page PDF, and you've got your best photos, your bullet points of what your unit includes, maybe a price range, because many people hesitate to put a firm price in writing. Then you just, based on length of stay, based on availability, that sort of thing, and then your contact info. So if you've talked to a corporate client and want to follow up, it's a good one piece that you can follow up with in addition to sending them a link. So that's probably what I would say on that.
Thank you, Elaine. A couple Furnish Finder things to tie in here, and then we'll wrap up the conversation. Is Elaine's making really good points that we've led to throughout the conversation is you don't need your own website necessarily as a mom and pop operator, but Furnish Finder has a built-in website for you. Your landlord profile has all of your properties on one page, and you can take that link and use it when you're communicating with interested parties. Say, here are all of my listings. If you'd like to, check out what type of properties I have. And you can get that link printed up on a business card or on a QR code, things like that. Like there's online links that you can create your own um, like digital card basically, and you can add
Yeah,
Furnish Finder landlord profile as one of those
yeah.
links on your digital card. So a couple things just to wrap up our conversation today. Um, we've been talking about different types of corporate housing clients and how to best capture their leads. One thing that I don't think, is mentioned often enough is the lead times. And when are corporate housing travelers looking to book properties? And same thing on the midterm rental level is we've got operators out there that they take a deep sigh of like they hold their breath of am I going to get someone? And then you get someone, right? Because Elaine has 12 to 13 years of experience with her own rental properties with 90 to 95% occupancy rate, and she's seen all the swings of the industry. Well, Furnish Finder says that the average lead time is like within the last 15 to 30 days of travel. So people aren't necessarily planning super far ahead for these corporate relocations or traveling needs at the midterm level.
I would say the average lead time is 1 to 3 weeks, and that's very typical. In corporate housing, you really can't know more than 30 days ahead because people are giving typically a 30-day notice to vacate. So, but that's rarely a problem. I would say 1 to 3 weeks is very typical. With travel nurses, I tend to see 10 to 14 days, but I'm sure every market's different. I think 1 to 3 weeks is something they could count on. And so when they say, I'm not hearing from anybody, I haven't gotten any leads, they could have somebody moving in within a week or 10 days. We don't know. They are not looking typically 60 days out. In other words, it's not that far. So I would say
That's,
one to three
yep.
weeks is very typical.
Yep, that's what we're finding at the midterm level. And I think a lot of operators freak out a bit and like, what do I do? And the first thing they want to do is drop their price. Dave and I have looked at the analysis because it's not a long-term rental for a year. Is it worth it to drop the price? And sometimes the numbers make sense to go ahead and drop the price. But it's not always like a lot of people say, don't do that. Hold strong to your product. So what's your opinion, Elaine?
Boy, before I drop the price, I'd do everything else. In other words, I would be taking a look at my listing and making sure that I've swapped. Like Katie said, I might move my photos around. I might make sure that my description is refreshed. All those things that would make me perhaps appear higher in the listing. I mean, there are times I have dropped a price and I'll do it maybe for a month and say it's a December special. And you might drop it by 100 or 150 and then let them know, make sure they're clear about it, that, you know, additional months are going to be at, the regular rate, something like that. So if you drop it, you don't necessarily have to drop it for the whole stay. And I also will let people know that you would love to have you renew, but that could be, the rate may change, based on the season or whatever. But dropping the price is not usually my first move. I will do almost everything before I do that, or even reaching out to other providers and saying, hey, do you have anybody that you can't accommodate? I mean, that's really where I will shake the tree and find another way, if at all possible.
Well, we've had so many great different topics discussed today about the corporate housing industry. Elaine, you're such a wealth of knowledge and important influencer in the corporate housing world. We appreciate you being here today. If anyone
Oh,
wants
yeah.
to connect with you further, how would you like them to do so?
The best way to probably reach me is by email. I'm actually changing my website right now, so I'm going to give you a Gmail address, which is corporatehousingstrategies@gmail.com. Corporate Housing Strategies website will be back up. I'm actually changing the content to where it includes more for midterm rentals, and not just corporate housing providers. So corporatehousingstrategies@gmail.com is probably the best, easiest way to find me.
Excellent. Well, you've heard another great episode on the Landlord Diaries. We appreciate you guys being here. If you're loving our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend. And we would always appreciate your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks, guys, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.